Hi everyone, we're just gonna wait a few minutes before we get started, see if anyone else wants to join. Hi everyone, we're just gonna wait a few minutes before we get started, see if anyone else wants to join. Cool, so for anyone just joining, we're just waiting just a couple of minutes just to see the numbers we can get. Okay, so I think we're ready to get started. So in this short half-hour segment, we're just hoping to bring you guys through the general idea of what is Hyperloop technology, which was something that Elon Musk developed in a white paper quite a while ago now. And then we're also going to talk about what Hype as a society does within the University of Edinburgh and how we help develop the technology. Yeah, so on the agenda, so first I'm just going to introduce myself and the other speaker today. We're going to talk about what Hyperloop is in terms of technology and why it's important and why we're working towards trying to develop it. And then thirdly, we're going to cover what our society does and how we are contributing to the effort to further Hyperloop development. So my name's Tom, and I'm the treasurer of Hype, and I've been at Hype for 3 years now. So I was an engineer for my first 2 years in the technical team, and then I moved on to becoming the treasurer of the society. So I'm going to bring us through the second half of the talk, but for now, I'm just going to introduce Stella, who's going to bring you through the first half of the talk, which is more research and technology focused, and then I'll bring us to the second half. So Stella, if you want to go ahead.
Hello, I'm Stella, and I am the research director at Hype this year. It is my second year in Hype, and I was previously one of the software engineers for the technical team. So what I'm going to talk about today is basically what is Hyperloop. So a bit of a story for you. A few years back, around 2013, the California high-speed rail project was announced, and that made Elon Musk very, very angry because he thought if we're going to invest so much time, money, and energy into a public transport project, it should be something that is better in all ways conceivable. So faster, safer if possible, environmentally friendlier, and also cheaper, both for the passenger and for the responsible entity. So what happened then was the publication of the Hyperloop Alpha paper that was that declared Hyperloop to be a new mode of transport and also an open source project for any interested party to contribute. And that is where this lovely picture of a Hyperloop in design comes from. It is from the original paper. So what is Hyperloop? Basically, a pod for about 20 to 50, or even a few more passengers, depending on the design, running in a tube in low pressure, and in most cases designed to be above ground, supported on pylons. So would look a bit like this in reality. So yeah, you can see a pod running through the tube. It's not a vacuum. There is some air, but it's reduced pressure, so it's not. It makes things easier, reduces drag, but it's not a complete vacuum, because that would be too difficult to maintain. The original Hyperloop, as proposed by Elon Musk and his engineers, was meant to be a bit of a different system than what it is today. So it was meant to be, the propulsion was meant to be linear induction motors, which is also used in many, it's in many designs today, but the levitation system would be more dependent on air. Well, now most companies use magnetic levitation. So a bit more on that. I will walk you through some of the questions of Hyperloop development and what the different systems look like. You will find in the duration of this talk that different companies that deal with Hyperloop development have designed very different systems. Although the principle is the same, they use different subsystems, different components, and it's very interesting to see what these differences are and what they mean for the limitations of the system, and things like that. So a very big question that is asked is, what is the ideal method of propulsion? So the two most prominent options here are vehicle side versus infrastructure side propulsion. So vehicle side propulsion is where the motor primary, or the component that draws power, is actually on the vehicle, while infrastructure side propulsion is where the motor primary is on the infrastructure. Now that can cause many issues. Obviously, an infrastructure side system would be more expensive, because the whole tube would have to be basically a very a component of the motor that requires quite a bit of work and lots of materials, and it's not really ideal from a financial point of view. However, a vehicle side propulsion system introduces issues like the fact that the vehicle would have to have some sort of power supply, most likely batteries, because there is no complete way at the moment to move energy from the infrastructure to the pod. So anything would have to come from the pod itself. But introducing batteries into the system means that the mass of the system is also increased significantly, and that means the whole system needs more energy, and that isn't a cycle that continues until the ideal battery weight is found. However, there's also the issue of heat. Obviously, in a low pressure environment such as Hyperloop, it's very difficult to deal with heat, and there is, again, no complete method at the moment of how to deal with that issue. And a new technology that has been proposed is still quite early in the stages of development. So it's very hard to know how different companies are planning to deal with that. However, many companies support the choice of vehicle-side propulsion systems because there are certain things that are good, like the financial aspect that I already talked about. So propulsion is important, but another thing that is very important is levitation systems. So here the question is mostly passive or active levitation, with passive being stable levitation force without active control that requires motion between the vehicle and the infrastructure. So basically it requires the vehicle to be moving. And active levitation, which basically is active control of the attractive force. Here, there is a slight preference towards passive levitation in Hyperloop companies. And I believe that is also because passive levitation can be combined with a infrastructure side propulsion system without additional cost. So without making the infrastructure more expensive, while active levitation cannot. There are also some benefits with passive levitation in terms of how precisely they need to measure certain things to make sure that it all works. And that is, there's a huge there needs to be a lot of accuracy with active levitation systems, which obviously makes things very difficult because measuring within half a millimeter isn't always an easy thing to do, especially in construction of big projects like a Hyperloop track. More than that, energy is a big question. Where does energy come from? Elon Musk originally had the vision that Hyperloop would be self-sufficient, so there would be solar panels on top of the tube, and all the energy for the system would come from that. However, the research on whether or not that is actually feasible and possible to be done is very lacking at the moment. Most of the time, companies and people working on Hyperloop focus a lot more on propulsion and levitation and not that much on energy. So another possibility would be to have power stations along the route certain places, and that those would power the tube, or even pod energy storage. However, that is the battery option basically, which has the issues that we've discussed already. So there is no correct answer to any of these questions, as you probably discovered. It's all about what compromise you're willing to make in reality. So more questions for you: tunneling or above ground? There have been discussions about having Hyperloop be completely underground. However, that is basically very expensive, and it would make the whole project a lot more expensive. So for most companies that are considering underground Hyperloop, it is only for places where that is necessary. So where there's an obstacle, or if a station were to be built within a city and not kind of right outside the city, where basically having Hyperloop go through the busy streets of London wouldn't really work. So then it would be a possibility to have it underground. But yeah, most companies are really considering just the overground option of Hyperloop. So it really depends. And lastly, how does Hyperloop compare to other methods of transportation? Well, that is a very difficult question to answer, because Hyperloop has not actually been done yet properly and full scale commercially, to see what the effects that it would have on travel would be. So basically, the top speed of Hyperloop, depending on the company, is something above 1,000 kilometers per hour, but it's that has not been achieved yet, at least not in public record. So it's hard to know if it would actually be there. And then efficiency is again one of those things that when it comes to energy efficiency, it has not been researched enough. And when it comes to travel efficiency for the passenger, it's hard to know, because where would the stations be? Would they be inside the city or outside? Would they need to go through a security check like airports, or would it be more like going to the subway? It really depends, and there is no clear guidance on any of these things at the moment. So who knows? Cost, well, cost is also a big one. As the Hyperloop technology progresses, the cost estimations get higher and higher. There you can find on the internet anything between 18 and 56 million per kilometer, which is a lot. However, it's really unclear at the moment if these estimations are accurate. However, it would probably be somewhere closer to the higher end of that scale, since these estimations are also the ones that take into account the cost of labor, the cost of land acquisition, and things like that, that perhaps the ones on the lower end of the scale aren't considering. What's the environmental impact of Hyperloop? Well, in theory, it's supposed to be a better alternative that runs on electricity and not anything like carbon heavy, so that would be great. However, how that electricity comes about is still a question that is left unanswered, and we'll have to see what happens when Hyperloop actually gets implemented. And when it comes to safety, again, it's very hard to say. Safety hazards have been in many cases identified and are being dealt with or are being planned for. However, it's difficult, especially when there has been talk about Hyperloop becoming a potential terrorist target because of the enclosed space and low pressure environment that could potentially cause lots of damage. However, in many cases that could be said about airplanes, could be said about boats and trains. It's really, it's worth considering. Obviously, safety is important. However, it shouldn't be the main concern. So yeah, there's a lot to consider when it comes to Hyperloop, and I hope these questions illustrated that for you a bit. So this is another one of our animations that is meant to showcase the difference in travel time between different modes of transportation. So you can see the car and the train traveling fairly slowly. And then the plane and Hyperloop going even faster. So that is the plan, and that is how we would like it to work in the future. So I'll hand over to Tom now.
Yeah, thanks, Stella. So yeah, so Stella's just brought you through most of the what is Hyperloop part of the talk. She's our research expert, so she knows the most about the technical side of the society. So I'm just going to bring us through one or two more slides about the technology part of society, and then I'm going to explain what Hyped as a society actually does. So yeah, the first slide should be problems facing Hyperloop. Stella, if you want to move forward, or ongoing Hyperloop developments. So yeah, so currently Hyperloop developments that are being currently worked on. Virgin Hyperloop is one of the biggest companies, and they have a number of different projects currently going on. One of them is the plan for a Hyperloop certification track to be built in the US, which they are in the early stages of development of. Another very key one in India is that they've secured planning to go ahead with a proposed Hyperloop route from Pune to Navi Mumbai International Airport and then on to Mumbai, which will be incredible if that's able to be implemented in one of the first commercial Hyperloop operations. Hyperloop Transport Technologies is the second company that works in the sector, and they've recently signed an agreement with Alder Properties for the first commercial Hyperloop system in Abu Dhabi. They're also conducting a Great Lakes US feasibility study in the US to connect Cleveland to Chicago and then on to Pittsburgh as well. And they're also working on a cargo prototype design for the Port of Hamburg, which is a proposal to use Hyperloop technology for port and inland shipping of cargo containers, which is the first of its kind. And then the last three companies there are more development and research companies. So Hard Hyperloop has a vision to create the first European Hyperloop network and the first European Hyperloop test facility, which is more vague and less actually certain because they're less far along with their development. Hyper Poland have a three-stage approach to slowly transition from their conventional trains to Hyperloop. And Zeleros is focusing mostly on the scalability of the technology. So they're looking into the research on how we can make it cost efficient, how we can make it worth it for governments to implement this technology, rather than going with a more conventional option, like a high-speed rail system. So yeah, that's the current ongoing Hyperloop developments. And next should be problems facing Hyperloop. Stella, if you want to move on. So problems facing Hyperloop. So currently, there is no universal standard for Hyperloop systems. So each company has a different system with different energy requirements, different cost and safety hazards, etc. So it makes it difficult to progress further since most of the information is proprietary. So what we really need to work on is developing a framework for each company to follow in terms of a standard for Hyperloop developments and Hyperloop systems. No regulations, so none exist currently about the safe operation of Hyperloop, meaning it's at the moment at the hands of each interested party to decide what constitutes safe operation regulations to make sure that all necessary precautions are being taken. And both of the above could in the future cause compatibility issues at borders and jurisdiction limits if there's no real constant regulation between borders on how we should develop Hyperloop systems. 30 there, the technology is not fully developed. So yeah, most of the components proposed, although existent, have never been operated at full scale, and therefore require much more time for testing and development. Fourthly, aspects of tech. So companies have been focusing mostly on levitation and propulsion, and that leaves things like high-speed switching, the logistics of how to enter the pod, energy requirements and how to meet them, and safety checks before departure to be determined later. So a lot of the tech still needs to be developed in the sector, which is another issue facing Hyperloop right now. Cost as well, which Stella briefly touched on. So as the systems get developed more and the technology used gets more advanced, the expected cost rises significantly, making Hyperloop no more appealing than high-speed rail in that regard. And it's harder and harder, it makes it harder and harder to convince governments to adopt this technology if high-speed rail actually proves to be more cost efficient when you look at the cost to performance ratio. Then there's also the issue of potential terrorist targets, which Stella also touched on briefly. So it's a low pressure environment with passengers in an enclosed space, and that can't easily be escaped. So it is unfortunately a possibility that we have to consider when it comes to the problems facing Hyperloop. And finally, cyber attacks. So the rate of cyber attacks in the world are rising. And a single cyber attack by a hacker to the software program could be fatal when we consider tech like Hyperloop. So yeah, I just wanted to finish the what is Hyperloop section on just some of the limitations and some of the problems that are facing Hyperloop, because these are the biggest issues that our society and that other societies and other Hyperloop companies are currently trying to work out. So yeah, so what is Hyped? So that's our next part of the talk, and that's just going to cover what we do as a society. So yeah. So Hype. So what do we do? So we were founded in 2015 at the University of Edinburgh, and we're one of many Hyperloop teams. And we're trying to make Hyperloop a reality by building our own prototype pods to showcase at events. The biggest one being the SpaceX competition, which has been running for a number of years now until last year when it was suspended briefly. So we're aiming to develop the concept in all aspects, technical and real life implementation. So what does that mean? So part of society is involved in theoretical research. So how feasible is the technology, how scalable, how efficient, which Stella has already talked about to some degree as our research director. We're also aiming to popularize the idea of Hyperloop locally and internationally. So we're constantly trying to work to raise awareness about Hyperloop, and we do that in the form of online courses for our outreach program. We also do outreach to schools, and we encourage students and college students to get more involved in STEM, which we hope will help to further the cause of this technology in general. And also, we'd like to highlight that we do more than just technical work as well. So we've got a thriving business team, which is split into marketing and business. So we have people involved in our society from across the university, many schools and disciplines, not just from engineering and other STEM degrees. So we have people working in sponsorships and also in our marketing department. So on the next slide there, we can see that the general breakdown of our teams throughout Hyped. So technically, we produce pod prototypes and push to realize the theoretical potential of Hyperloop, which is probably where we have the most people. Then research focuses on the feasibility of Hyperloop. And at the end of the year, we aim to bring out a research paper this year on the feasibility of Hyperloop in general. The third sector of society is outreach, and that's online courses, outreach to schools, bringing the pod to various events. Obviously, some aspects of outreach have been curbed due to the coronavirus and COVID-19. We still have a strong outreach sector and are focusing a lot of our efforts on developing an online Hyperloop course to teach people about technology. And you saw a sneak preview of some of the course's animations earlier when Stella showed you those 2 brief videos. And finally, business. So that's mainly behind the scenes work. So sponsorship works to contact companies, offer partnerships, work with them, and we maintain good and close, tight-knit relationships with our sponsors. So our past achievements. So this just looks at what we've done in the past. So sort of a timeline of Hype's past achievements. So in 2016-17, we produced our first pod, which we nicknamed Polymath Pod Phase, and we competed in the SpaceX finals. And in the 2017-18 academic year, our second pod was designed and built, and we placed 6th place in the SpaceX pod competition. Then in 2018-19, the Flying Podsman, which is our third pod, and we again reached the finals of the SpaceX competition in California. And throughout all this, we were also developing the research and outreach wings of the society, not just the technical. And finally, last year, in the 2019-20 fiscal year, we designed the pod, which we nicknamed Greyfriars Poddy, and that design was completed in the spring. And we now hope to, COVID willing, design and test that pod this year. Which brings me to the next slide, which covers our main goals for 2020 and 2021. So what are our priorities this year? So number one, we want to make the first UK Hyperloop pod test track. And as an extension of that, we want to be the first UK Hyperloop team to run a prototype pod in the UK along that test track, which would be a milestone for Hyperloop in the UK. We're also looking to publish a formal research proposal to introduce Hyperloop in the UK. We also want to organize and participate in European Hyperloop Week, which I'm going to cover a bit more in the next slide. Introduce more knowledge retainment and training into the society, and also improve communication between teams and sub-teams. So this is just a visual timeline of the plans we have for this year. So as you can see, September, new member recruitment. October, workshops and training of the new team. In the end of 2020, we want to publish our online course. The outreach room is going to publish our online course. Q1, testing and manufacturing. Q2, 2021 is preparation for pod runs. Then May 2021 is to develop the test track in Edinburgh. And summer is to publish our formal research paper and also participate in the European Hyperloop Week. So what is the European Hyperloop Week? So it's a new initiative that Hyped and a number of other Hyperloop societies have developed. Swiss Loop, which is obviously based in Switzerland, Hyperloop UPV, which is the Hyperloop team in Valencia, and Delft Hyperloop. So in the wake of no organized SpaceX competition, our team has been heavily involved in developing this new initiative. We needed something to fill that void. So we conceived the idea of a European-based event similar to SpaceX competition in California, which would involve talks and presentations from people in the industry and a competition as well. So the week will likely be structured so that the first few days involve conferences, talks, lectures given by individuals in the industry. And then the last few days involve a technical showcase of Hyperloop team's designs. And this is just a sneak preview, but there'll be much more released by Hyped in the coming weeks and months about what European Hyperloop Week aims to accomplish. So yeah, thanks for listening. Just a few other quick points. If you're interested in learning about Hyperloop, you can check out our website at the link there. And if you're interested in working with or partnering with Hyped, or you know a company that might be interested in working with Hyped, on any of the projects we've mentioned, so EHW, the test track, then you can get in touch via our social media. So we're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or you can also email us team@hyped.com. So yeah, and now if anyone has any questions, we're happy to take them for just a couple of minutes before we end the talk. So anyone on the live stream listening, if you want to pop a question in the chat box, and me and Stella, or me or Stella, will try and answer any questions you have. Okay, so I'm guessing that no one has any questions, which is cool. So yeah, if anyone wants to learn any more about Hyped, you can check out our website. And yeah, thanks very much for listening, guys. And I hope you learned something about Hyperloop and about our society. And yeah, thanks very much. So I'll be ending the live stream now.
Thank you.